I want my baskets to look like they were made in the 20th century. After a while, you really try to push that definition. You really want to find out what a basket is and what it isn't.
Maker John McQueen, a walk in the woods is more than just exercise. For it is there, among the basswood and the pines, and the fields and the streams, that he gathers the natural materials as well as the inspiration for his craft. For many centuries and in many civilizations, baskets have been admired and collected as utilitarian objects as well as sculptural forms. But it was not until about 10 years ago that American artists sought to revitalize this so-called humble art. Here in Alfred, New York, naturalist, sculptor, craftsman John McQueen uses traditional techniques and materials to make distinctly contemporary baskets.
Well, I think a basket, by definition, has to be a container, because if it's closed off completely, it's not a basket, it's a piece of sculpture or it's a whatever. But so for it to be a basket, it has to be inside, outside, and so forth. The ones that are closed off always still have a place that you can get to. Then there's another space that's closed off.
I've heard you describe the basket as the first man-made object. How did it originate?
Well, it's a theory. That's not my theory, but it's a theory that when we still lived in trees and caves and stuff, that I don't know if it's true or not, but that when we were picking berries and swinging from tree to tree, well, sooner or later you can only hold so many berries in your hand or in your mouth. So someone took a leaf and folded it, put the berries in the leaf, and carried it back, and that was the first man-made object. That was the first what would be called a basket.
Well, your own background was as a sculptor. What was the distinction between sculpture, weaving, and basketry for you? What was the first basket?
I was living in New Mexico. Of course, there's a great Indian population there and culture. And actually, I went to the state fair and saw the first baskets that really excited me was at the state fair. Huge architectural baskets that the Indians had made. They were very exciting. So I really started at that point, and I've been working with natural materials in my sculpture, like adobe and stuff. So from that point to the basket point seemed a very small step.
Have you ever considered making baskets out of materials that are more typical of sculpture, for example, clay or metal?
No, I think baskets, by definition, is made out of fiber or natural pliable material. It's a kind of what I call a mechanical connection. There's something that sticks up, which in a basket's a spoke, and then there's something in front of it and something behind it which holds it up. And that's a very integral part of baskets. It has to be that way, I think. So if you make a basket out of clay, you're not really making a basket, you're making a clay object that looks like a basket. That's a rather tight definition, but coming from my point of view, that's the way I see it.
Let's go back for a moment to your beginnings. You grew up in Fort Lauderdale in the 1950s, before it was a world of high-rises and condominiums. Was there anything in that experience that introduced you to the naturalism that you practice today?
Well, it wasn't high-rises then.
What was it like?
You could hear the alligators during the mating season. It was the time you never messed with the alligators, and then you could always hear them at night. So from that you can tell I didn't live in any high-rise. But there was a certain naturalness that you could look back on. Of course, it's all in hindsight. At the time I was just being a kid. But I think the basket direction comes more out of other things, my own personal development, I guess.
How do you begin? What's the first step in making a basket?
Now, I work out of a sketchbook. I use a sketchbook, carry it around, and have it in one place.
And for how long have you worked in that way?
Well, it comes out of the tradition of art. I've always had a book that I write in. Sketchbook's a kind of funny term, but that idea, a book that has blank pages in it, and I fill up all the blank pages.
With words as well as sketches?
With words as well as sketches, right? Some sketches. I've always been interested in words as an image, and words as physical objects. Because I work with physical objects, I've tried to find ways of incorporating that physicalness into my baskets. This is just a sample to try and see if the structure of words, as you can see, I sort of worked them out in a sketchbook, that just tied together will actually make a structure. And so I won't have a surface and then words on the surface, but I'll actually have the words themselves as the structure.
Can you tell us what this flow is all about?
This right here says inconversible ties. And over, under.
Right behind you, I know, is the basket that you completed most recently. Would you be good enough, perhaps you can take it and show to me what appears to be words or images sculpted in a spiral way around this basket. The first word that I'm looking at looks like speech. Am I correct?
Right.
Perhaps you can rotate it and tell us what it says.
Well, I haven't memorized because I did.
You did it for so long.
The idea was the words that would come off the surface. So it's a physical word versus when you see a word on a page, what you see is a change of color from the white page to the black ink or the whatever color it is. So I was interested in how you could make a mark without making a mark. And one way of doing that is physically put the mark there. So if you cut a word out of paper and laid it on top of another piece of paper, then you would have an image there, but it would be more than if you just wrote it there. So in this case, they're actually woven on the surface. And I don't try to make them hard to read. That's to make something physical, that's as close as I've been able to come so far. So to me, they're very readable because I've looked at them a long time.
Is the material reed?
No, this is white pine bark, which is kind of a nice idea because white pine bark is black.
How essential are natural materials to your idea of what a basket is?
You work towards a certain direction, of course, but it never happens that way. If you just think about natural materials, they're alive when you pick them, and then they dry, something happens to them. You re-wet them, something happens to them, and then you weave them together, something happens to them, and then it dries again. So it never comes out the way you see it. But hopefully there's some part of the idea that carries through. Basket making very easily gets sucked into the material. It's very seductive. So it's very easy to find a really beautiful material and then try to make the idea fit the material. In the woods, I collected in whatever way is the easiest for me to collect. Take bark off the limbs. The hill behind our house is called Pine Hill, so I have a lot of pine baskets. And red osier, which is a kind of dogwood that grows here that has a very bright red bark, which I like a lot.
I know that you go to ponds and streams as well.
Right. All the farmers around all have ponds for their cattle, and cattails have a tendency to fill in ponds, which the farmers don't like, so then I have a whole list of farmers that would be only too happy for me to clean out their ponds, so I have enough cattails or reeds to last forever.
So how much of your life is adapted to the seasonal nature of the year?
Well, my working life, it's very, I collect materials at certain times. It's a part of my life. I have to collect, say, barks in what I call maple syrup season, which is like spring when the sap starts to rise and everybody else gets maple syrup. I know that's the time I can start to collect bark, and again, things like cattails would be after the first frost when the liquid or water inside the material starts to come out. So there's a certain time for each thing.
Do you ever find that you're short of a material that you need for a certain kind of basket? What do you do then? Do you substitute one material for another, or do you pick up another basket till the season that material is available?
I have waited for material. If it's a very particular case, it's a very long process, so it's not a big thing to wait till the next season because there's plenty of other things I can be working on. So I have shelved an idea. But if you think about it, going into a store and there's a certain selection, say there's a selection of 10 items of the same thing that you want, you think you have a large selection, but when you think about going in the woods, there's thousands of possibilities, so there's all kinds of material.
How long is that process? How long does it take for you to create a basket?
Well, the actual weaving time is not so long, but it takes as long to collect the material. The physical activity, it takes as long to collect the material and get it ready, whatever it means, cutting it into strips or whatever. And then there's also another set of time that is about the material drying, which is not, it has to be set aside.
How much of your time do you spend gathering and preparing the material?
Well, for any particular basket, it's at least half the time. It's half the over-under.
Well, you've made reference to the phrase overs and unders,
right.
And I picture you weaving in and out as you say that. How many overs and unders does it take to create a basket, approximately?
I've never sat there and counted 1, 2, 3. It'd be too depressing. But if you, if you know how many spokes there are and how many there is in an inch or something, you can sort of guess at the numbers. And different baskets have very different numbers, but of course the closer they are woven together, the more the numbers are. But it can go up to like 20 or 30, 40,000 overs and unders.
And how many baskets can you manage to create during the course of, let's say, a year?
Well, I do about 10 to 12 a year, so that makes about 1 a month. And that includes, I work on more than one at a time, so it's hard to say exactly how many.
Well, to give us an idea of how exacting your work is, how much of your time do you spend in the studio?
Well, that's what I do. That's my full-time job. I go there in the morning and leave in the evening. I try to be as disciplined about it as I can. It's a disciplining kind of activity, so you have to spend a lot of time at that activity of actually going over and under weaving it. So it's going in the morning and stopping for lunch. And
what's a typical day like?
Well, that's it. It's getting up, having breakfast, Jessie going to teach at school or working in her studio, and I go into my studio. With cattails is they really are flexible, but
can't count on
the more flexible it is, the more serious.
What is that piece?
The one with it's a cylinder, and you look down in the hole, and there's words on the inside.
Hey John, wait a minute. 1 cup left. You want it?
Yeah, thanks.
That you create are so carefully planned, they are so meticulous, but I wonder if that is a reflection of the work process itself.
I have a hard time with things that are loose, not what I feel is not quite got it together, fringe and things like that. But for the idea, it's usually a kind of conciseness. It's a container form in itself. It's a basket form in itself. Finishing of something, the beginning, middle, and end, which is a kind of closure, which is a kind of container.
You manage to adhere to what appear to be very complex basket patterns.
Oh, they're not complex. Anytime you take a lot of elements and you repeat them a lot of times, you see a very complex surface or texture. But over and under is just over and under. It's not as complicated as that. The structure might be complicated, but the actual weaving is very simple.
Well, how much of the pattern for a basket is spontaneous?
I try to keep as much spontaneity in baskets making as I can, but because of my own personality and also because of the slowness of the technique or the discipline. It takes a long time to make a basket, so as much spontaneity as possible, but you never know.
How do you manage to sustain yourself during all those repetitions?
Oh, your head's always way ahead of your hands. It's a constant, or my head's always way ahead. It's a constant kind of anxiousness, I guess. I always want to finish and get on to the next thing because I'm thinking about the next thing. The actual physical over and unders is a very tedious work.
What's the most satisfying part of the process?
Oh, I don't know. I don't like that, the concept that now it's finished, there it is. That's not satisfying to me. Making art is back to words, is a verb. It's making art. It's not finished object art. So from the artist's point of view, it's the physicalness of it, and so that's sort of where I'm at. So I'm not interested in after it's done, and I'm into the next thing.
Do you keep many of your baskets for yourself?
I don't keep them intentionally, no. Again, when they're finished, so it's just a matter of time.
Do you work on commission?
No, I never have. And I think it's a kind of strange concept of somebody commissioning a basket. Like you can commission a wall hanging or something, but baskets have a funny kind of place in society.
And what is that place?
Well, everybody has baskets, but if you notice, baskets, more and more they're not so, but are always in the kitchen, which is a neat thing.
I thought more and more they were in the living room or the library.
That they are more and more, but traditionally baskets were in the kitchen, and so they have always had that kind of concept about them, which is a whole other thing, and they are more coming out in the living room, which is nice.
How do you explain the interest in about the last 10 years in revitalizing baskets as an art form? They were always thought of as a rather humble aspect of the arts.
Humble was one of its better characteristics. There was even worse ways of thinking about baskets. It came with the craft movement as fiber did, as weaving did, and I guess clay and pottery was sort of breaking through certain boundaries, and then along came fiber with that, and baskets is still considered a kind of fiber. Well, it is a fiber, and there's been a renaissance, a resurgence in interest in that sort of direction. I like the idea that baskets are becoming looked at upon as more than objects, a humble object. That it can be looked at as an idea.
In some of your most recent work, and I've seen you working on creating letters from what I would call twigs. And then I noticed that you applied yet another layer on top of a finished layer. What is the idea behind that work?
Well, again, it's working with the word idea. In that particular case, I'm trying to physically make the basket out of words. Instead of making a basket and putting words on it, I want the words themselves to be the structure. And so, if you wrote out words, a sentence, you'd notice that they don't touch, the letters don't touch each other. So all I've done is added another layer of words so that I end up with enough structure to hold it together. And that's sort of the physicalness of it. The idea has to do with the building up of ideas or thoughts. You never have an isolated thought. There's another thought either on top of it or underneath it, if you think of it in the physical sense. So there becomes a lot of not extraneous even, important ideas that build up on top of each other. And that's the way that basket is. The wall is the layers of, so far 2 layers, with 3 layers of words.
Well, give us a clue. What are some of those layers and what do they say? What's been on your mind with all those overs and unders?
Well, the inside layer says around and around and around. So the words become around and then around and around, which is a very direct thing with baskets that go around and around. And then the next layers, they change directions and the words meet their own ends again. So I happen to have a pond and a have fishing, and I know the fish eat each other. So one of the things is striped bass eat striped bass eat striped bass, so that you can continue to read it forever.
Is that another metaphor for continuity?
Yeah, I guess so.
And some order and reason to the chaos that surrounds us?
Well, I'm glad that anybody can read anything into them. It's always people, the viewer always adds things for me too, so that's good. I think.
How important is the work of critics to your work?
Well, it's not a big part. It's just that it's not criticized a lot. It's not exposed the way traditional art has been exposed to critics. So it doesn't play a large role in the basket area. So far they've only said good things, and we need a good critic that says bad things too. It's such an early discipline, many ways, but as far as a resurgence of discipline, it's...
Do you see it as a discipline that's going to proliferate? For example, here you are, one of the most admired basket makers in the country, and for whatever the series of reasons, you do not choose to teach.
Well, I don't choose to teach because I think I am a maker. I make the object, and I think that's very important, that there's somebody that's physically doing it, and then there's other people talking about how it's done. But the most obvious reason is there is no place that you can go study basket making. There is no basket
No
making.
place at all?
There's no department of art that includes basket making as one of their courses. In the fiber classes, they include basket techniques, but there's no place where you could major in basket making.
But here we are in Alfred, New York, a town that has 500 people as its permanent residence, but 2 colleges. Mm-hmm. Is there no room in either curriculum for basketry?
Well, I suppose there is room.
Now that it's taken seriously?
It's nice living in a town that you spend all the time working in your studio. I don't wish that differently. I'm perfectly happy working every day in my studio.
Considering the length of the process and the nature of the materials used, it seems to me it requires a very strong commitment and a very special kind of person to devote their life and their art to the making of baskets.
To me, it's a discipline that has happened, but I had no control over it or no conscious decision. So to me, a basket is a kind of metaphor for many things, different directions you can take that. And I like that metaphor, and there's something I feel very comfortable. Comfortable is a bad word, at ease with making baskets. So it sort of fits my personality.
What next for you in your own work?
I hope to just keep working and take it in the direction that it's going, whatever direction that takes. So there's no real secret or no blind turn. It's just moving along and kind of over-under kind of direction.
John McQueen's baskets are more than beautiful containers. They are the work of an artist whose creative integrity is as evident and timeless as his superior craftsmanship. I'm Barbara Lee Diamonstein for Handmade in America.